If you asked me when it started, I wouldn't point to a fight or a confession or even some dramatic scene straight out of a movie. No, for me, it began with something far quieter, almost forgettable, but it lodged itself in my memory and never let go, like a single crooked thread on a shirt you can't stop pulling at. It was a Thursday evening in Charleston. One of those formal corporate events Lauren had been planning for weeks, the kind where people pretend it's about networking, but it's really just an excuse to dress up, drink too much, and quietly compete for promotions. She worked in client relations for a mid-sized financial firm that took itself a little too seriously. This was their annual brand summit, and spouses were invited to give the illusion of balance and support. I remember standing in front of the mirror, fixing my collar, and hearing her hum in the bedroom as she got ready. I walked in, and there she was, slipping into the sleek navy blue dress I hadn't seen before. It hugged her figure in a way that was elegant, but definitely attention-grabbing. Her hair was pinned up, with a few loose strands falling the way magazines probably call effortless. She looked beautiful. She knew it too. "You look incredible," I told her, watching as she clipped a delicate gold earring into place. She smiled. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Mr. Reynolds." Her tone was playful but distant, the kind of compliment you give when your mind's already somewhere else. The evening started off normal enough. Champagne, name tags, forced laughter. I mingled with a few of her coworkers, most of whom I only ever saw once a year at these things. But about an hour in, I noticed she was no longer by my side. I scanned the room and spotted her on the dance floor, moving with someone I didn't recognize. Tall guy, crisp suit, athletic build. I found out later his name was Tyler, worked in another department, something technical. Maybe. Whatever. What stood out wasn't him, it was the way they danced. There was something too natural about it. Not just coordinated, but connected. Their bodies moved in a rhythm that didn't scream. "We just met at this party." His hand rested low on her back, guiding her with ease. She smiled up at him in a way I hadn't seen in a while, like she was light, weightless. And he laughed, too. Not that awkward polite laugh you give a colleague, but something deeper, more personal. Like they shared a joke the rest of us weren't in on. I watched for maybe 20 seconds before looking away, telling myself not to be that guy. Jealousy is ugly. And besides, it's a corporate dance floor. What's she supposed to do? Stand in a corner all night? But something was off. It wasn't just the dancing. It was the way they held eye contact a second too long. The way her hand stayed on his shoulder even after the song ended. Little things. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could call out without sounding insecure. And that's exactly how doubt starts, small, subtle, but persistent. Later that night, back at home, I helped her unzip the dress. As I hung it over a chair, a scent hit me. Not hers. Not mine. Cologne. Rich, musky, expensive. Definitely not the kind of generic stuff I wore. "What's that smell?" I asked casually, holding the fabric to my nose. She looked up from taking off her earrings. "What smell?" "Your dress. It smells like cologne." "Oh," she said almost instantly. Tyler wore this ridiculously strong stuff. We had to do a silly little skit for the crowd. Fake dance-off for the management team. It was all planned. Super cheesy. She laughed, shaking her head. "You know how these things go." And the way she said it? Smooth. Unbothered. Like it was nothing. Maybe it was. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I didn't ask anything else. We crawled into bed after that. She turned away from me, scrolling through her phone until the screen dimmed out. I stared at the ceiling, that scent still faint in the air. I told myself to let it go. I'd seen too many Reddit threads about husbands getting paranoid and controlling. That wasn't me. I wasn't going to become that guy. But the next day, as I was eating lunch at my desk, an email came through from the company's internal photo team. Some kind of recap gallery from the event. "Thanks for making the summit a success." I clicked through absent-mindedly until one picture stopped me. Lauren and Tyler caught mid-laugh during their dance. The photographer had snapped it just as the song ended, her hand in his, their fingers still linked. His other hand rested on her waist, too comfortably. Her face was lit up. She looked happy. relaxed, present. It was a good picture. Too good. That night I showed it to her. "This the skit you were talking about?" She leaned in, squinting at the screen, then nodded. "Yep, told you it was silly. We were pretending to be star performers or whatever. Everyone got a kick out of it." She smiled again, but her body language had shifted. She crossed her arms, just slightly, and looked at me like she was waiting for a reaction. I gave her none. "Looked like you were enjoying it," I said, keeping my tone even. She rolled her eyes, laughing lightly. "Don't start. It was nothing. Just work stuff." I let it drop. I told myself I trusted her, that I should trust her. But here's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes, it's not about a smoking G*N. It's about the absence of smoke when there should have been some. The lack of hesitation in her answer. The way she didn't ask why I was showing her that photo in the first place. A few days later, I did the laundry. That dress, even after the wash, still smelled faintly of that same cologne. I remember holding it to my face again, trying to convince myself I was imagining it, but I wasn't. I didn't bring it up. What was I going to say? "Hey, the fictional cologne from the pretend skit you did is still haunting our laundry bin?" I sound insane, but I kept the photo on my phone, tucked away in a folder I never opened again, just knowing it was there. From that moment on, I started noticing things. Or maybe they'd always been there, and I just started seeing them differently. It's amazing how one small crack can make the whole surface look unstable. She started humming to herself more. Sounds innocent, right? But they were love songs, old ones. Stuff she never really cared for. Sam Cooke, Etta James. Once I even heard her humming At Last in the shower. And maybe that sounds crazy to clock that as a red flag, but when you've been with someone for 10 years, you start to notice the changes that don't make sense. She was always texting lately. Fast thumbs, slight smirk, screen tilted away. Not enough to scream secrecy, but just enough to make you wonder. She changed her phone wallpaper to a vague beach scene. The one before that had been a goofy photo of us on a boat last summer. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being ridiculous. But late one night I couldn't sleep. I rolled over to check the time, and her phone lit up. 1:34 a.m. A message preview flashed. "You still awake?" Smiley face, no name, just that line. She was asleep, or pretending to be. I stared at the message until it disappeared. I didn't unlock her phone. I didn't want to be that guy. But I also didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Still, I said nothing. Not because I trusted her, but because I wasn't ready to know if I couldn't. I think most people assume that betrayal hits like a lightning bolt. Sudden, obvious, clean. But the truth is more like a slow fog rolling in. You don't even realize it's taken over until you're already surrounded by it. And by then, you can't remember what clarity even looked like. After the night of the dance and the scent that wouldn't wash away, I tried to push the whole thing out of my head. I kept telling myself it was just a weird night, that I was overthinking, that every couple goes through patches of doubt, especially after years together. But there's a difference between paranoia and pattern recognition. I just didn't realize I'd crossed that line until it was too late to pretend otherwise. It started with her schedule. Lauren had always been reliable with her routines. She worked 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Client meetings sometimes bled into happy hour, but nothing out of the ordinary. We always had dinner around 7, maybe later on Fridays if she had a deadline. But after Charleston, things shifted just enough to notice. She started coming home later. At first, it was client dinners, which wasn't suspicious on its own. Her firm entertained new business all the time, but the frequency picked up. What used to be once a month became once a week. Then it was twice a week. Then it was 3 nights in a row. Each time, she'd come through the door with this strange energy. Bright, chatty, almost rehearsed, like she was overcorrecting for something. She'd bring leftovers I hadn't asked for, compliments I hadn't earned. One night, she handed me a to-go box from an Italian place across town and said, "Figured you'd be starving since I worked late. Your favorite." It wasn't my favorite. Not even close. But I smiled, thanked her, and tried to swallow both the pasta and the lump in my throat. She also stopped leaving her phone around. That, more than anything, was what pulled the rug out from under me. Lauren used to toss her phone anywhere, the kitchen counter, the coffee table, sometimes even the bathroom sink if she was multitasking. She used to leave it face up, unlocked, accessible. It wasn't even a thing. But now, it was always face down, always close, and suddenly there was a passcode. First, I noticed it by accident. I tried to check the time one morning when my phone was dead, grabbed hers off the charger, and was greeted with a lock screen. Nothing major, but it hadn't been there before. I asked her about it casually, and she laughed it off. "Oh, we're getting new IT protocols at work. Company policy. Everyone's supposed to secure their phones now. You know how paranoid they are." It sounded reasonable. But that was the problem, it sounded too reasonable. Lauren never used to lie so smoothly. And that's when I realized something else had changed. She was always 2 steps ahead of my questions. Not in a defensive way, but in a prepared way. Like she had practiced these answers in her head. Her appearance started evolving, too. Slowly but undeniably. Lauren had always been stylish but practical. She didn't spend hundreds on designer bags or spa days. She hated high heels and once joked that if I ever caught her in a Pilates class, I should call the cops because she was being held hostage. But now, she was getting her nails done every other week. Not the basic French tips she used to wear for weddings. Full sets. Gel acrylic designs. New clothes started showing up in the closet, still with tags. Brands I knew she used to scoff at for being ridiculously overpriced. One Tuesday, she came downstairs in a tailored gray blazer and heels. Stilettos, not block. When I raised my eyebrows, she gave a little twirl. "You like? I'm meeting a potential client, big account. Gotta look sharp." I nodded, but something in my chest pulled tight. She used to come to work in cardigans and flats. Now she looked like she belonged in a Vogue spread. And then there was yoga. Lauren hated yoga, swore it was a scam, called it bougie stretching. But now, she had a membership to a studio downtown and was waking up at 6 a.m. on Saturdays to go sweat out the week. "Helps me clear my head," she said, rolling up her new Lululemon mat one morning. Clear her head. That's what she said. But I was the one losing sleep. I tried truly to brush it off. Maybe this was just part of her growing into a new phase. Maybe she was leveling up at work, taking herself more seriously. But then the coincidences started stacking. One night while taking out the trash, I noticed something strange in the bin. An envelope torn in half, buried under coffee grounds and a cereal box. I wasn't trying to dig. It just caught my eye because the paper was heavier than usual. It looked premium. I pulled it out and flipped it over. The logo was small, gold, embossed. Marquee Garden in Executive Lofts. The address was familiar. Not near her office. Not in any area we usually went. It was in a quiet corner of the city filled with art galleries, boutique hotels, and apartment buildings marketed toward creatives. The envelope was addressed to a Ms. L. Reynolds, her maiden name. A reservation confirmation, if I had to guess. The date was 3 days earlier. A Thursday. My mind immediately rewound. Thursday. Client dinner. She came home late. Told me it ran long because one of the partners showed up unannounced. She had even brought me a leftover slice of carrot cake. I stared at that envelope for a long time. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront her. I just filed it away, like everything else. Because that's what I had started doing, collecting, tracking, watching. And once I started, I couldn't stop. She used to leave receipts in her purse. Now they were shredded. Her calendar, which had always been synced to mine for dinner plans and reminders, suddenly stopped updating. She claimed the app was glitching. I Googled it. No such bug. I even noticed her voice changing when she talked to clients. One night, I walked into the room while she was pacing near the back patio with her AirPods in, and her tone shifted the second she saw me. She smiled wide, laughed once, then said, "I'll call you later. Gotta go." Not, "I'm home." Not, "I'll see you tomorrow." Just, "I'll call you later." When I asked who it was, she blinked like she'd forgotten I existed. "Oh, just Julie from marketing," she said. "You've met her, right? Short, curly hair?" I hadn't. I nodded anyway. The next morning, I opened her laptop while she was in the shower. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe validation that I wasn't crazy. Maybe some clue, some journal entry, some open tab that would explain everything. But it was clean. Too clean. No saved passwords. No recent browsing history. Not even a trace of her usual shopping habits. That's when it really hit me. She was hiding something. And she was doing it well. Each of these things, on their own, could have been explained away. People change. Habits shift. Marriages hit ruts. But it was the timing that made it impossible to ignore. Every late night lined up with my busiest days at work. I manage regional accounts for a supply chain company, and when I travel, I'm off the grid for hours. Sometimes whole weekends. She used to call when I landed. Now she didn't even text. The distance between us wasn't just emotional. It was logistical. Like she was planning around my blind spots. And maybe the worst part? She was so calm. So composed. Like someone who had already made peace with what she was doing. There's a moment when suspicion stops being theoretical. When it stops being about wondering and watching and trying to read between the lines. It becomes real. Tangible. And no matter how much you thought you were prepared for it, you're not. For me, that moment came on a cold Saturday in March. Lauren had told me she'd be gone for the weekend. A client development retreat, just outside the city. Her firm was putting together a weekend-long strategy session with a few partners and high-profile clients, out in the countryside. A rented estate. She showed me the flyer. It looked official enough. Branded letterhead, fake candids of smiling execs. I even recognized one of the other attendee names, a guy she had mentioned before in passing. She kissed me before leaving that morning. Light like always. She smelled like that same perfume she'd started using recently. Something with vanilla and white pepper. I think. It lingered even after the door closed behind her. "I'll be back Sunday night," she said. "Don't forget to water the succulents." I laughed. "I always forget the succulents." She smiled. A real one. For a second, it almost felt normal. But once the door shut, I just stood there. My gut wouldn't let it go. Something about the timing, the way she packed. Light, quick, almost mechanical, it didn't sit right. And honestly, I think part of me already knew the truth. I just didn't want to admit it without proof. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. We had a family tracking app installed on our car. A leftover feature from when her parents stayed with us the previous summer and borrowed it regularly. She had set it up so we could see where the car was at any given moment, mostly out of convenience. I hadn't opened it in months. But that morning I tapped the icon. Her location popped up instantly. I expected to see it heading west, toward the hills, where the retreat was supposedly happening. But it wasn't. It was in the city, parked near the old warehouse district, the kind of area that had been revitalized in the past decade with lofts, indie coffee shops, and art galleries. Definitely not the countryside. I stared at the map, blinking. Then I refreshed it. Same spot. I tried telling myself she must have stopped for something. Coffee, gas, maybe a quick errand before hitting the road. But 30 minutes passed. Then another. Still no movement. I watched the little blue dot sit there like it had roots. Something in my chest shifted. I got in my own car and started driving. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't even text her. I just followed that dot, gripping the wheel tighter with every passing block. The closer I got, the quieter the world seemed to become. Like the air itself was holding its breath. I turned onto a narrow side street lined with old brick buildings. Most had been converted into trendy lofts or boutique art studios. The street was quiet. No traffic. The late winter sky cast a gray hue over everything. Then I saw it. Our car, parked neatly along the curb. The back windows still dusty from the previous week's rain. I pulled into a spot half a block down and K** led the engine. From there I walked. The GPS had led me to one of the loft buildings, a place I recognized from a magazine feature a few years back. Industrial charm meets modern living. exposed beams, floor-to-ceiling windows, a place for creatives with deep pockets. I kept my distance, standing on the opposite side of the street, tucked behind a tree. One of the lofts on the second floor had its lights on warm amber, soft through gauzy curtains. I wouldn't have thought anything of it until I saw her, Lauren. She walked into view, barefoot, holding a glass of wine. Her hair was down, loose. She was wearing one of those soft wrap sweaters she only pulled out for cozy nights at home. I watched her set the wine down, then sit on the arm of a couch, laughing. Then he walked in. It was him, Tyler, from the dance. The man who had moved with her like they had history. He handed her something, maybe a phone, maybe a book. Couldn't tell. But I saw her take it from him with both hands, smiling. Then he leaned in. Not rushed, not hesitant, just certain. Their lips met like they'd done it before. It wasn't a peck. It wasn't a mistake. It was the kind of kiss you give someone you don't have to hide from. The kind of kiss that says, "I've missed you," and I felt something inside me collapse. I turned away, my vision blurring, my body suddenly cold despite the jacket I was wearing. I walked back toward my car without even looking back, climbed inside, and just sat there. The engine off, the world silent. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Long enough for the streetlights to flicker on. Long enough for my hands to stop shaking. For weeks, maybe months, I had been second-guessing myself. Telling myself not to assume, not to project, not to become one of those paranoid husbands who reads too much into things. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I held off. I waited for honesty, for a slip-up, for her to come to me. But that moment through the glass, that kiss, that setting, it stripped everything away. There was no more ambiguity, no room for excuses. It was real. It was happening. She was cheating on me, and not in some clumsy, impulsive way. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was intentional, rehearsed, established. The way they moved, the comfort between them, it told me this wasn't new. This had been going on. I had just been too slow to catch up. I sat in the dark car, staring out at nothing, and felt everything I thought I knew begin to unravel. 10 years of marriage. Vacations, inside jokes, family dinners, the little rituals we built together, gone. Just like that. I kept thinking of all the times I'd looked her in the eye and believed her. Every, "I love you," every "just a client dinner." Every time she laughed off my concerns. And she had been here, in this loft, with him. I didn't cry. Not then. Maybe I was too numb. Or maybe the pain hadn't reached the surface yet. But I remember sitting perfectly still and thinking, so this is what it feels like to break quietly. I didn't knock on the door. Didn't confront her. Didn't blow it all up right then and there. Because in that moment, I realized something more important. If I had proof, I didn't need her explanation. I didn't want her lies. I wanted control. I wanted a plan. So I drove home. When she returned the next night, smelling like hotel shampoo and another man's cologne, she greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and asked if I wanted to order Thai. I said yes. And I smiled, because she had no idea I already knew. They say the truth will set you free. Maybe that's true in the long run, but when it first lands, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like gravity. Like someone took the floor out from under you and you're still pretending to walk. That Sunday night, Lauren sat across from me on the couch, eating pad thai out of a cardboard container, talking about how exhausting the retreat had been. "The house was gorgeous," she said. "Too many egos, though. I swear. Everyone there was just trying to out-idea each other." She even laughed. This warm, familiar laugh, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't spent the night before wrapped around another man in a loft downtown. I watched her closely, not with anger, with curiosity. I was seeing her now through a different lens. Like I was finally reading the full script after months of just guessing the plot. She looked happy, relaxed even, comfortable in her lie. And that, strangely, was the thing that broke me the most. I thought the worst moment would be seeing the kiss. But it wasn't. The worst moment was watching her smile at me afterward like nothing had changed. Because for her, it hadn't. But for me, everything was different. That night, once she was asleep, curled on her side like she always did, a soft hum in her throat, I sat in the kitchen with a notebook and started writing. Not thoughts, steps. That was the shift. I stopped wondering what she felt. I stopped wishing she'd confess. And I stopped waiting to be heard again. I knew what I'd seen. I had no illusions left to protect. There was only one thing left to do: reclaim control. Step 1 was documentation. I combed back through the calendar on my phone and started matching dates. All her client dinners, strategy retreats, yoga intensives. Any time her excuse hadn't sat quite right, I noted it. Then I pulled up our shared account. We'd always been transparent about spending, not because we were control freaks, but because we had a system. We even had a joke about it: 2 incomes, 1 wallet. But now, I scrolled through the last 4 months with new eyes. $217 at a restaurant we'd never been to together. Tagged on a night she said she had team drinks. $383 at a boutique clothing store she told me was just window shopping. $89 at a hotel bar 2 weeks before Charleston. That one burned. Each line item became part of a file I named something cold and simple: LR discrepancies. I didn't think about what it meant. I just collected, quietly, methodically, a paper trail of the unraveling. I also started taking *TS, her text previews when her phone lit up, photos she posted and later deleted. I installed a backup drive and copied everything from our home computer. Not because I knew what I needed yet, but because I was done being behind. Next, I went to our safe. We kept everything there: passports, mortgage documents, tax records, and, most importantly, our prenuptial agreement. Lauren and I had signed it before we got married. Not because either of us was rich, but because I had started my own business in my 20s, and she wanted protection for herself too. It wasn't romantic. It was practical. And in that moment, it became something else: leverage. I read every page slowly. It was mostly standard. In the event of divorce, each party retained what they entered with. Joint assets would be split. But then I found it. A single paragraph, buried near the end, written in plain legalese. In the event of confirmed marital infidelity, the offending party forfeits rights to all shared property and jointly held accounts. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. This wasn't just paperwork anymore. This was the exit ramp. I took a picture of the clause, printed a hard copy, saved another to the drive. My stomach turned as I did it, but I kept going. Over the next few days, I began shifting accounts. Not in huge, obvious moves, just subtle realignments. A new checking account in my name only. Redirected my direct deposit. Called my accountant and updated my information for tax season. I didn't say why. Just told him Lauren and I were streamlining. He said he understood. He'd heard that before. I moved the deed of my business back under my sole name. It had always been mine legally, but we'd added her name to some paperwork for banking purposes a few years ago. I changed that, quietly, permanently. I also started looking into lawyers. Not just divorce attorneys, though I found 3 and read every review. I looked for those with a specialty in high-conflict separation. Ones who didn't flinch at messy cases. Ones who didn't believe in mutual resolution as a default setting. I wasn't out for revenge. I just didn't want her to have the chance to lie again. Not in court. Not in public. Not to me. Around the house, I acted normal. Maybe too normal. I made dinner like I always did. I kissed her forehead when she left for work. I asked how her day had been. Not because I wanted the answers, I already knew they were lies. I did it because pretending gave me space. Gave me time. She never suspected. She was too deep in whatever story she'd written for herself. And every day I studied her. How she smiled when she texted. How she hesitated when she answered questions. How she used we less and I more. Her phone was always locked now, but sometimes she'd leave it charging in the kitchen. I'd walk past it like it wasn't even there, but I knew its contents were the lockbox to the whole story. I also started paying attention to her patterns. Tyler's, too. After Charleston, I asked one of Lauren's coworkers, a guy I knew casually, what department Tyler was in. Business architecture, he said. But I think he's been working remotely a lot. Of course he had. Lauren mentioned that same department when talking about her new project, the one that had so many late meetings. The one she said was K*ling her evenings. Now I knew why. I checked Tyler's LinkedIn profile. It was public. He had recently liked a post from a winery outside the city. The same winery Lauren had brought a bottle home from just because 2 weeks earlier. The puzzle pieces weren't scattered anymore. They were clicking into place. The more I documented, the calmer I felt. Not numb. Not detached. Just clear. The strange, what heartbreak does when you stop feeding it with questions. I wasn't waiting for Lauren to explain herself anymore. I wasn't hoping for a confession. I wasn't even angry. At least not in the way I expected. What I felt was precision. Focus. A shift in purpose. This wasn't about saving the marriage. It was about protecting myself from the slow erosion of it. The version of me who begged for honesty, who sat up late replaying conversations, who stared at her while she slept wondering what changed. That man was gone. In his place was someone who had already accepted the loss. But not the defeat. That was the difference. I didn't want to destroy her. I didn't want to humiliate her. I just wanted to be done on my terms, with my head held high and the truth on my side. I didn't know exactly when the exposure would come, but I knew it was coming. And when it did, I'd be ready. There's something surreal about holding proof in your hands. Not suspicions, not hunches, but actual verifiable evidence. It doesn't make you feel powerful at first. It makes you feel tired, like you finally crossed a finish line only to realize it was the starting point for something else entirely. When I finished building the file, the collection of receipts, **TS, timeline overlaps, GPS logs, and digital breadcrumbs, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt hollow, but I also felt something new, ready. I knew the moment was coming, the one where I stopped being quiet, where I stopped playing defense. And when it arrived, I didn't hesitate. It began with a manila envelope. Inside was everything: dates, names, copies of transactions from our joint account used to cover her work dinners with Tyler, a color-coded timeline, even a few photos I'd pulled from her phone backups that had auto-synced to our shared cloud drive. Most were innocent if taken alone, her at a wine bar, at an art gallery, but when paired with Tyler's location tags from his public posts, they lined up like train tracks. I made 3 identical copies. One went to her company's human resources department, not out of spite, but because I knew their code of conduct policy. She and Tyler weren't just having an affair. They were doing it while representing the firm, sometimes with clients present. And that wasn't just unethical, it was a legal liability. The second package went to the compliance office. Same firm, different stakes. Their internal policies were clear. Conflicts of interest, undisclosed personal relationships that impact project oversight, misuse of expense accounts. All things that had happened, all things they took very seriously. The third? That one I delivered in person. It was addressed to Tyler's wife. Yes, he was married. I found her Facebook profile 2 weeks earlier. Her name was Claire. Teacher. 2 young kids. Lived about 20 minutes from us in a neat little neighborhood filled with swing sets and flower beds. I didn't send the envelope anonymously. I drove to her house on a Thursday afternoon while Lauren thought I was in a meeting. Claire opened the door wearing a paint-stained apron, probably halfway through prepping for a class art project. Her expression went from curious to confused to devastated in the space of one breath. "I think you deserve the truth," I said, handing her the envelope. She didn't say anything. She just nodded, then stepped back inside and quietly closed the door. It didn't take long for everything to detonate. 3 days later, Lauren came home early from work. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables like it was any other evening, when she walked in, pale and shaking. "We need to talk," she said. I set the knife down and turned to her. "They know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "HR. Compliance. Everyone. Someone sent. Everything." "Not someone," I said calmly. "Me." Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked like she'd been slapped. "They're launching an investigation," she went on. "They put me on leave. Without pay. Tyler too. They froze the project. I don't. She shook her head like she was still trying to wake up. Do you understand what you've done? I stared at her for a long moment before replying. No, I said. Do you? Her face cracked. You sent it to his wife, didn't you? She whispered. I nodded once. No apologies. No regrets. She backed up and sank into a chair. Oh my God! For the first time in months, the control she had clung to began to unravel. Her voice trembled. Her hands fidgeted. Her eyes darted around the room like they were looking for a way out. But there wasn't one. That week, everything shifted. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask her why. I just watched her unravel, quietly, methodically, the same way I had unraveled all those months ago. Her phone didn't buzz as much. The confident texts stopped coming. Her coworkers, the ones who used to message her late into the night, went silent. The investigation spread through her firm like a virus. People who had once praised her professionalism now kept their distance. Meetings were held without her. Her name stopped appearing on group messages. Her emails, the ones she once dictated with precise, clipped confidence, were met with auto-replies and silence. Lauren tried to act like it was temporary, like she could clear it up. She told me HR hadn't proven anything, that it was all circumstantial. I didn't respond, because I knew something she didn't. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about the optics. Her spotless reputation, the one she had spent years building, was no longer spotless. It was tarnished. Publicly, quietly, but permanently. She started to spiral. Every day, she'd go into our shared office and pretend to work. But I'd walk by and see her staring blankly at the screen. No Zoom calls, no emails, just tabs open to HR policy documents and law firm FAQs. I began sleeping in the guest room. She didn't ask why. She knew. In her quieter moments, I think she realized what was happening. Not just to her career, but to us. She'd walk past me in the hallway and flinch slightly, like she expected confrontation. But I didn't give her that. I gave her silence. The same silence she had given me for months. The kind that says you already made your choice, now live with it. One night, around midnight, I heard her crying in the bathroom. I didn't get up. I just